I've been using Google Docs as a teacher for over 10 years now, and I'm going to show you my favorite features that I use both inside and outside of the classroom. Hello, welcome back to my channel, Charlie's Lessons, and in this video we're going through ways that I use Google Docs as a teacher. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you a way that I edit Google Docs that makes it even easier to use. Let's get started with the first way I use Google Docs, which is to plan my lessons. So the first thing we need to do is open a new Google Doc. So to do that, we can do two things. We can go to the Google Apps in the top right hand corner, and we can choose either Drive or go straight to the Docs app here. Just a little tip for you here. If you do tend to use the Google Apps menu a lot and you want to have your most frequent apps at the top, then you can actually click and hold and move these around like this, you see? So you can have the most important ones and the ones you never use down the bottom. Anyway, if we go through Drive and we want to access a Google Doc, a new Google Doc, then we just go to New, Google Docs, and start a blank doc here. Otherwise, we just go straight to Docs and we click on blank here. Once we've got a blank document, and this is when I'm going to write a lesson plan, I'll first go to File, Page Setup, and set it to Landscape. This way I've got a wider canvas to work on. The first thing I do is I go to Insert Table, and I'm going to pull up, let's say, 4 columns and just 1 row. If I want to add another row, all I do is go to the final cell in the table and press Tab. It's important to know how to divide the class into stages. So I'm going to put stage, then I'm going to have the time, and then I'm going to have the content, and then any links to any external resources I'll put in this column here. It's going to readjust these so I can fit in everything I want to write about. Let's assume this class is 60 minutes long, and we'll include the stages here just from 1 to 10, for example. So let's assume this is an adult class. Let's say it's a Monday afternoon or Monday morning, and the first thing I usually do with adults or with most students is to ask them about the weekend. So I'm going to get them either to work in pairs or in groups, or I'm going to ask them individually in front of the class to share what they did on the weekend. Why do I do this? Well, just to make the students feel settled, and also just so I can learn more about my students as we spend this academic year together. I'm not going to include any materials or resources for this, and I think I've got a class of about 10 students, so this could take anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. Here you can see I've added a few more stages, so you can see here that I'm reviewing last week's language that we've been studying. And to do this, I've got a link to a set of Quizlet flashcards. And what I'll do here is I use this, and so I've got it in my lesson plan so I can link straight to it. Then you can see here I'm moving on to a second stage, and I've got a link to a presentation that I'm going to be using with my students about a holiday that I took a number of years ago to India. What I'll do is I'll continue to complete this lesson plan until I feel like I've got enough support for the students to achieve the objectives for this class. I like having lots of different stages because I like my classes to have lots of variety, and I like the changeover of activities to be nice and quick. Now, seeing as I'm going to be reusing this throughout the academic year to plan my lessons, once I've got just the table up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to name the document. Every time I make a new lesson plan, I'm going to go to File and Make a Copy. This will give me the option of making a copy, which I can then edit, and I'm not going to touch the master copy. Moving on to number 2, I'm going to show you now how I use a similar method to plan for a whole academic year. So when I've taken on a new group at my school, once I've got hold of the course book, look through all the units and have a little think about the grammar, the vocabulary, and the skills or functions that I'm going to need to get my students practicing and learning this year. In any kind of course book, you are presented with a table of contents. What I'll do is I'll take a look at these, and on the Google Doc is, again, I'll go to Insert a Table. I'm going to put 3 columns. I'm going to drop it down as far as I can go because I'm going to need to cover the whole year. Depending on how often you see your group, in my situation, I usually see my groups twice a week. So what I do is I just pull up a calendar, I take a look at how long we are going to be in class together and the dates of each class. And I will complete this for the whole academic year. It does take a bit of time, but it's worth it. What I'll do here is I'll write content and I'll write here materials or resources. So what I'll do now is I'll look at the units in the book again. So in this course book, we can see that there are 8 units. As I'll map out all the units and divide them up between all the classes we have this academic year. The right-hand side is as I'm adding the units and the vocabulary topics, I'll start adding resources or materials that I'm already familiar with, which I know will work well with those language areas. So as you can see, I've started mapping out the first month of the course, which is focused on Unit 1. And I can already see that in a few weeks, we're looking at personality in Unit 1. And I already am familiar with this website, which is called fungamery.com, and there is a section on personality quizzes. So I'm going to pop this link into the resources column in my academic year plan. And the idea is that as you are becoming familiar with all the language areas in the book, you can begin to add materials and resources as you go. Now, as I keep coming back to this document throughout the academic year, what I like to do is check off all the activities, all the areas in the book that we finished. To make this easier to use, we're just going to select all this text and go to checklist up here. Now we've created a checklist. So let's say, for example, the first class went perfectly well. We managed to review all the basic present and past tenses in the class. And I'll just click tick. And now this will strike through that unit. And I can see now that this is finished. If, for whatever reason, I was not able in the second class to complete all the activities about family life, then what I might do is cut this and add it to a later stage in the class. I can just click this off, but I've also made it clear that I'm still to cover family life later on in the month. If you're working on a lesson plan and you don't want to do a checklist, but you do want to strike through certain text or certain sentences, then we can use this function. So select the text, go to Format, Text, and it's this option here that's called Strike Through. So you might want to use this if you are updating your lesson plan and you have decided not to include that material or that activity in your lesson. But this way you keep the text on the screen. I prefer this than deleting it because it helps me to reflect on the class. And if I've made a change to the class before I do the lesson, then maybe in hindsight, there are some activities that I should have included, and I can see them there. Next, with number 3, is looking at how I use Google Docs to collaborate with the other teachers in my school. So going back to my academic year plan, let's imagine that I'm working in a school where there is more than one teacher working with the same level or the same group of students. Something like this is perfect, because what I can do is I can share this document with the other teacher and we can collaborate and work together on producing a plan for the academic year. So to do this, I go to share in the top right hand corner and I would add a particular person to this document. Make sure that it's chosen as editor, that way that person can edit the document. If you don't want to make any permanent changes to the document, then you can just select an area which you'd like to comment on and click on Add Comment. Here we can ask a question to the other teacher. For example, should we cover this next month? Press comment, and now this comment will appear to you and the other teacher. If we've now created an academic plan for the whole year, which we'd like to use the following year, or we'd like to share with other teachers, maybe not within the school, then we go to File, Download, and choose PDF. A PDF is a format that can be shared and opened by a number of different programs, so it's the most versatile file format that you should use if you're sharing with a lot of people. Moving on to number 4 now, I'm going to show you how I use Google Docs to collaborate with my students and also for my students to collaborate with each other. So to get your students collaborating on a Google Doc, you're going to make a new Google Doc blank document and you're going to name it. This is going to enable you to share it. The important things you have to set here are that anyone on the internet can edit with this link. You're going to share this with all the students that are coming to the class or going to be working on this document in class. So you can share this link via Google Classroom, ClassDojo, Seesaw, any learning platform that you're using with your students, and that way it will grant them access to this document. So there's a lot of different things you can do with your students. One of the first things I like to do is just make it clear to the students where they're going to be working on. So for example, if we have a group 4 students, what I might do is make a table like this, then add their names at the top. So Pablo, Alicia, Hugo, and Carmen, for example. And I'd make the space big for them so they can use this. And what I'd ask them to do is to use the space to work on whatever we're doing in that class. I'll give you a little look to what it looks like for the students. So I take the link, and as you can see, the little pink cursor, this is the teacher, this is me. And as Pablo, well, saying, hello, my name is Pablo. And if we go back to the teacher's view, we can see here, I can see the anonymous iguana, which is Pablo, and he's edited this text box already. Here's an example of a short story that I asked my students to write for me in class. The 2 students in question worked on this together because they both had the link. Now, what I can do as a teacher is I can correct this using either comments or the strike through option. So for example, here I can see that he said even so, when he probably wants to say even though. I'm just going to add a comment saying use even though here. Okay. Or if I want to change the text or a longer piece of text altogether, or I want to suggest a rephrasing of the sentence, I can just select the text like this, format, text, and strike through, meaning that I want them to change this. With a lot of writing activities that I give my students, I ask them to comply with a word count. So for example, 100 words or 150 words. If I want the students to check this, or if I want to check this, all I need to do is select all the text like this, go to Tools, and Word Count. Sometimes with writing tasks like this, I might ask the students to include, say, 3 adjectives, or maybe 3 pieces of vocabulary that I would like them to use. So for example, let's say I ask the students to use the word scared. Now, if I would like to find this word, then all I need to go to is Edit, Find, and Replace. Alternatively, I can press Control F and find in Documents. So let's say that I want to check quickly if they've used the words that I've set them before we started the task. So scared, I can see here they've used it twice, so that's exactly what I was looking for. Another great tool for students to use is to use a dictionary. So here you can see that I've selected the word scared, and on the right hand side I've got a definition. It also includes a phonetic script so the students can learn to pronounce the words as well. Now perhaps let's say you're working with your group, and instead of having them write what they'd like to express, you could get them to draw something. Now, to draw something in Google Docs is very simple. We just go to Insert, Drawing, and press New. And we're now in Google Drawings. We just have to select Scribble, and then go to Save and Close. You can see now that the picture has appeared in Pablo's square. Well, let's say maybe I wanted to ask the students what they did on the weekend, and I want them to draw it rather than write it. Then maybe Alicia is going to draw a picture of her house, and she's going to say, teacher, on the weekend, I stayed at home. Now, the 5th and final tip that I'm going to show you is how I use voice typing on my mobile phone to edit Google Docs on the go. So I'm going to go to Google Docs, and I'm going to find the document we were working on during this video. And here I have the plan for the academic year. Now let's say that I've looked at this, and suddenly on the bus or with some friends or whatever, something's come to my mind and I want to add it to the topic that we're going to be studying in class. First, I want to click Edit, put myself into here, and just on the right hand side, I'm going to press Voice. Do an activity where students have to describe something, but they can't say the word, and the other students have to guess. There you go. But don't record that. Stop recording. Okay, finished. And I'll just click the tick button here, and now that's been saved onto the same document that I have shared with myself on the computer, or even with other teachers. So now we've seen 5 ways that we can use Google Docs as a teacher both inside and outside of the classroom. If you use Google Docs with your students or in your school, and you have some other ways that you use Google Docs, then let me know in the comments below. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.